Welcome to Uncut, Gems and Their Stories. I'm Paige. How are you? Whether you're here to unwind, learn something new, or just escape reality for a little while, you're in the right place. Because this is the podcast where we dig into the raw, unpolished stories hidden inside the world's most incredible gemstones. So grab a drink, light one up, get comfortable, and let's uncover another story. Welcome to Uncut. What if I told you that one of humanity's oldest tools is still sharper than the scalpel your surgeon might use today? A black volcanic glass that built empires, revealed prehistoric trade routes, allowed priests to speak with gods, and even today, scientists still struggle to manufacture a blade sharper than it. This is the story of Obsidian. And today's stone is honestly kind of an overachiever. It helped early humans survive, it built economies, it became sacred. It terrified invading armies, it solved archaeological mysteries, and somehow, after more than 1 million years, it's still teaching scientists new things. Not bad. For what most people would probably call a black rock. Except, here's the first twist. Obsidian isn't actually a rock. Yeah, I know, we've officially started the episode by lying to you, but it's not technically a mineral either. It's something much stranger. It's glass. Natural volcanic glass. Now, when I say glass, don't picture a kitchen window exploding out of a volcano. Although, that visual is kind of interesting. Imagine you're making homemade caramel. And if you let it cool slowly, all those sugar molecules have time to organize themselves. They line up, they become orderly, and you get crystals. Nature works exactly the same way. Normally, when molten rock cools beneath Earth's surface, the atoms have time to arrange themselves into beautiful crystal structures. That's how we get granite, quartz, feldspar, even gemstones like emeralds and sapphires. Their atoms are incredibly organized, like millions of tiny Lego bricks snapping perfectly into place over thousands or even millions of years. But obsidian doesn't get that luxury. It forms during volcanic eruptions, from lava that's incredibly rich in silica. When that lava finally reaches the surface, it can cool almost instantly when it touches air or water. So fast that the atoms never get the chance to organize themselves into crystals. Everything simply freezes. Imagine hitting the pause button on chaos. Every atom is stuffed exactly where it happened to be the instant the lava cooled. The result is volcanic glass, a frozen liquid trapped inside solid form, which is kind of mind-blowing, because when you hold a piece of obsidian, you're holding something that never really finished becoming a rock. It's geological procrastination. Earth basically said, you know what, good enough, and just left it. But here's where things get even weirder. Obsidian isn't stable. It's actually what geologists call metastable, meaning given enough time, it slowly starts trying to become the thing it never had time to become in the first place. Over millions of years, the glass gradually reorganizes itself. Tiny crystals begin to form inside. Eventually, that beautiful black glass transforms into ordinary crystalline minerals like quartz, a process called devitrification, which means obsidian has a geological expiration date. Think about that. We always imagine rocks lasting forever. Mountains seem permanent, cliffs seem permanent, but obsidian is temporary. Slowly, patiently, Earth reclaims it. And that's why finding every ancient obsidian, well, it's actually pretty rare. Most of it simply didn't survive long enough. It quietly transformed into something else before anyone even took note. I love that. There's something poetic about it. This incredibly sharp, beautiful material only exists because nature rushed the process. And eventually nature comes back to finish the job. But while obsidian is temporary on a geological timescale, for humans it might as well have been magic. Because imagine you're an early human. You've never seen metal, you don't know what steel is, and one day you find this jet black stone lying near a volcano. You hit it with another rock, and instead of breaking into chunky pieces, it fractures into edges so sharp they can shave hair, cut leather, slice meat, turn sticks into spears. You'd think you discovered a superpower. And honestly, our ancestors kind of did. The earliest evidence we have of humans using obsidian dates back around 1.2 million years at Melka Kuntur in Ethiopia. Long before cities, long before farming, long before writing, humans were already recognizing this strange black glass was unlike anything else on Earth. But here's the crazy part. Thousands of years later, it would become something far more valuable. It would become the world's first breadcrumb trail. A stone so unique that thousands of years after someone picked it up, scientists could trace exactly where it came from. It would allow archaeologists to uncover trade routes, lost civilization, and connections between people who lived hundreds, sometimes thousands of miles apart. All because of one piece of black volcanic glass. And that's where our story really begins. Imagine you're an archaeologist. You uncover a tiny obsidian arrowhead. It's been buried underground for maybe 5,000 years, and at first glance, it's just another stone tool. Cool, old, probably belongs in a museum, but then you take a tiny sample smaller than a grain of sand and run it through a machine. A few minutes later, the computer tells you something impossible. Not just how old it is, but exactly which volcano it came from. What? How? It's because every volcano has its own recipe. Think about baking chocolate chip cookies. Everybody starts with roughly the same ingredients: flour, sugar, butter, chocolate chips. But everyone's recipe is just a little different. Maybe grandma adds more vanilla. Maybe your neighbor uses brown butter. Maybe someone throws in a sea salt because they're fancy, and volcanoes are kind of the same way. Every magma chamber deep inside the earth contains tiny amounts of different elements. Iron, titanium, rubidium, strontium, zirconium. Little chemical ingredients that mix together in slightly different amounts. When obsidian forms, those trace elements get locked inside the glass forever, like a geological fingerprint. No two volcano sources are exactly alike, so today, scientists can analyze that fingerprint and match a piece of obsidian back to the very volcano it was born, which is ridiculous and amazing. Imagine buying a kitchen knife, losing it, and then someone finds it 6,000 years later and says, oh yeah, that came from aisle 7 at Target in Phoenix. That's basically what archaeologists can do. Only with volcanoes. And once scientists figured this out, history started changing. Because suddenly they weren't just finding tools anymore, they were finding journeys. One obsidian blade might be discovered hundreds of miles away from the nearest volcano. Another nearly 1,000 miles. Another on the opposite side of a mountain range no one thought ancient people had crossed. One by one, these little black stones started connecting dots. Communities that historians thought had never met were trading with each other. Ideas were traveling, technology was traveling, people were traveling. Thousands of years before there were roads, thousands of years before written language. Long before anyone had drawn a map, and people already knew how to cross continents. Obsidian proved it. It's honestly one of my favorite examples of archaeology because unlike gold or pottery or jewelry, obsidian doesn't lie. It always remembers where it came from while it can. Scientists sometimes joke that obsidian is like nature's barcode. You scan it and it tells you where it was made. One of the earliest large-scale obsidian trade networks appeared in what's known as the Fertile Crescent, that region that stretches through part of modern-day Turkey, Syria, and Iraq. Thousands of years before the pyramids, people were already transporting obsidian across incredible distances. Not because it looked pretty, although it definitely did, but because everyone wanted it. It made better blades, better scrapers, better spear points. If your village didn't have a volcano nearby, you traded with someone who did. Simple as that. The same thing happened all over the world. In North America, indigenous peoples traveled to places like Yellowstone's Obsidian Cliffs, where massive deposits of volcanic glass were exposed along the mountainside. For thousands of years, people quarried this glass, crafted tools from it, and carried it across huge portions of the continent. Some of those pieces have been found hundreds of miles from Yellowstone itself. Think about that. No highways, no GPS, no trucks, just people walking, trading, meeting neighbors, sharing ideas, one obsidian blade at a time. And then there were the Aztecs. If obsidian was valuable everywhere else, it was priceless in Mesoamerica. Entire economies revolved around it. The Aztecs controlled rare sources like the brilliant green obsidian from Pachuca, a stone so distinctive that archaeologists can still identify it instantly today. Controlling the quarries meant controlling trade. Controlling trade meant controlling wealth, and controlling wealth, well, meant controlling an empire. It's funny, we usually imagine ancient trade being all about gold or silver or jewels. But for much of human history, the thing everyone wanted was really, really, really sharp glass. And that's because nobody had discovered steel yet. To us, obsidian is decorative, but to them, it was about survival. It fed families, protected villages, built economies, connected civilizations. And in the next part of our story, it became something even stranger. Because somehow this volcanic glass, created naturally by an exploding volcano, still has an edge that modern surgeons sometimes choose over steel. So let me ask you something. If I told you the sharpest knife on Earth was invented over 1 million years ago, would you believe me? Because at first, I wouldn't. And I really didn't put together the fact that ancient Mesoamerica and humans, they weren't trading metal. They didn't have access to metal. They didn't know what it was yet. And we're living in the age of titanium, carbon fiber, lasers, robotic surgery, surely. Modern science has figured out how to make the sharpest blade imaginable, right? Well, not exactly. See, steel is an incredible material. It's tough, flexible, it bends before it breaks. But that's why we've built civilizations around it. But steel has one tiny problem. Under a microscope, if you really, really look at it, it's ugly. Okay, seriously, a steel scalpel might feel razor sharp to your finger, but zoom in enough and the edge looks like a mountain range. Tiny ridges, tiny teeth, tiny imperfections. Kind of like a microscopic bread knife. Obsidian is completely different because it isn't made of crystals. When it breaks, it doesn't bend, it fractures. And those fractures are unbelievably smooth. Scientists have measured obsidian edges that are only about 3 nanometers thick. 3 nanometers. To put that into perspective, your hair is roughly 30,000 times thicker. That is wild. If your hair were the width of a football field, an obsidian blade would be about the thickness of a blade of grass. It's almost impossible to imagine, impossible to truly understand. Instead of tearing tissue, obsidian slices cleanly between cells. That's why surgeons have experimented with obsidian scalpels for incredibly delicate procedures. Cleaner cuts, less trauma, less inflammation, potentially less scarring afterwards. Now, before anyone throws away their kitchen knives, obsidian isn't perfect. It is incredibly brittle. Drop one and it might chip. Twist it and it can snap. So while it's sharper than steel, it's nowhere near as durable. That's why your chef's knife isn't made of volcanic glass. Could you imagine? I'm making spaghetti, snap, there goes my knife. But I love the story and I love the irony. One of humanity's oldest materials still outperforms some of our newest technology. Sometimes nature figures things out long before we do, and thousands of years ago, people didn't need an electron microscope to know obsidian was special. They just needed to cut something. Now I want you to imagine you are a Spanish conquistador. You've crossed the Atlantic. You've got steel armor, steel swords, steel helmet. You're technologically superior, or at least that's what you think. Then an Aztec warrior charges toward you, carrying a wooden paddle. You almost laugh until you get closer, because that wooden paddle has razor-sharp obsidian blades embedded along both sides. This weapon was called the macuahuitl, and despite looking almost primitive, it was terrifyingly effective. Spanish accounts claimed it could remove the head of a horse in a single swing. Whoa. Now, historians debate whether those stories were exaggerated. Probably, but who cares? People have always exaggerated battle stories. But archaeological testing has shown the weapon could inflict horrific injuries. The obsidian blades didn't crush, they sliced. Deep, fast, clean. Like dozens of tiny scalpels attached to a club. And here's the thing, the Aztecs weren't randomly sticking pieces of glass into wood, they had mastered obsidian. Entire workshops specialized in making standardized blades. Using pressure flaking, craftsmen could produce nearly identical cutting edges over and over again. Imagine an ancient factory making thousands of interchangeable razor blades, except they're made from volcanic glass. The rare green obsidian from Pachuca became especially valuable. The Aztec Empire controlled its quarries, which meant they controlled one of the most important resources in Mesoamerica. Gold was beautiful, but obsidian was necessary. And when you control something everyone needs, you become incredibly powerful. But obsidian wasn't only used to fight wars. It was also used to speak with gods. If you ever looked into a polished piece of black obsidian, you know it doesn't reflect light quite like an ordinary mirror. It almost pulls you in. It's dark and deep, endless. Now imagine seeing that without understanding reflections, without electricity, without glass mirrors. It must have looked supernatural. The Aztecs certainly thought so. One of their most powerful gods was Tezcatlipoca, whose name translates to the smoking mirror. According to Aztec belief, Tezcatlipoca carried an obsidian mirror that allowed him to see everything. The past, the present, the future, truth, lies, nothing could hide from him. Priests carefully polished obsidian using abrasive sand until the volcanic glass became reflective. These weren't decorations, they were sacred objects, used in ceremonies, divination, royal rituals. Looking into one wasn't simply seeing your reflection. It was believed you might glimpse the spirit world, or perhaps the truth about yourself. And honestly, I kind of understand why. Even today, there's something mesmerizing about obsidian. It doesn't sparkle like a diamond, it doesn't flash colors like an opal. It absorbs light. It feels mysterious, like staring into still water at midnight. And now that I know it's volcanic magma just frozen in time, it also feels like you're holding time frozen in your hand. I feel like it's very metaphorical. Across cultures, obsidian became associated with protection, transformation, creation, hidden truth. Some legends can claim the god shaped humanity using obsidian blades, while others believe the stone protected its owner from negative spirit. Whether you believe any of these stories, one thing is undeniable. This wasn't just a tool. It wasn't just a weapon, it wasn't just jewelry. For thousands of years, obsidian sat at the center of human civilization. It helped people survive. It built empires, inspired religions, connected continents, and somehow it's still teaching us about ourselves. Because in the final part of our story, we're going to discover that obsidian isn't just a window into the past. It might also be a glimpse into the future. You know, I think the coolest part about obsidian is that its story never really ended. Most Stone Age tools eventually became museum pieces. Bronze swords, museum pieces, Roman armor, museum pieces, ancient pottery, museum pieces, but obsidian never quite retired. It's still finding new ways to surprise us. Because while archaeologists were busy using it to uncover ancient civilizations, medical researchers were looking at the exact same material and asking a completely different question. What if we started using this again? It almost sounds backwards. Usually technology moves forward, we invent something new and leave the old stuff behind. Nobody's trying to replace smartphones with carrier pigeons. But obsidian was actually gone back. Because despite everything we've invented, nature still makes one of the sharpest blades we've ever seen. Researchers continue experimenting with obsidian scalpels for delicate surgical procedures, because their edges can be so incredibly smooth that they separate tissue with remarkably little damage. Think about it. The material that helped early humans butcher animals over 1 million years ago can also help perform some of the most precise surgeries imaginable. That's kind of unbelievable. And scientists still aren't finished with it. Researchers are investigating obsidian for everything from advanced biocomputing interfaces to new material science applications. Thanks to its unique molecular structure and compatibility with biological systems, who would have guessed that frozen lava might play a role in future technology? But maybe my favorite modern use isn't in medicine, it's archaeological. Because every single time someone uncovers an obsidian tool, it's like discovering a postcard from the past. Scientists can analyze its chemistry, identify the exact volcano it came from, and suddenly a forgotten journey comes back to life. A hunter carrying a spear across the mountain ranges. A trader traveling hundreds of miles to exchange goods. A village connected to another culture that historians never knew existed. One little piece of black glass rewrites another chapter of human history. And if that's not cool enough, there's another trick that obsidian has. Because remember when I said it slowly changes over time? Let's circle back to that. Scientists can actually use that to estimate when an obsidian tool was made. Freshly broken obsidian starts absorbing tiny amounts of water from the surrounding environment. Over hundreds of thousands of years, that hydration layer grows thicker. Measure it carefully, and archaeologists can estimate how long ago someone shaped that blade. Imagine that. A rock keeping time. Not with gears, not with clocks, but simply by breathing in water, one molecule at a time. It's beautiful, because obsidian has spent over 1 million years doing two things at once. It both preserves the past while quietly recording the passage of time. Not many materials can say that. When we started this episode, I told you obsidian wasn't really a rock, it was frozen lava, a liquid caught in a moment. And maybe that's why its story feels so different from every other gemstone we've talked about. Diamonds tell stories about unimaginable pressure. Emeralds tell stories about impossible chemistry. Rubies tell stories of kings, war, and power, but obsidian tells the story of us. It tells the story of curious people who looked at a volcano and thought, I wonder if I can use that. It tells the story of strangers meeting strangers, trading ideas, crossing mountains, building relationships long before anyone wrote history down. It tells the story of priests searching for answers inside black mirrors, of artisans who could shape glass into blades sharper than steel, of scientists who are still discovering new uses for something that our ancestors picked up over 1 million years ago. And maybe that's why I love this stone so much, because obsidian reminds us that progress isn't always about inventing something new. Sometimes it's about realizing the old ways were pretty incredible too. Thank you all so much for hanging out with me for another episode. If today's story taught us anything, it's that sometimes the greatest discoveries aren't made by creating something better. They're made by looking at something ancient with fresh eyes. Well, that concludes today's story. Tune in next week. Next episode is sure to be a gem.